I was already in my car. Seatbelt clicked, engine running, when my phone lit up on the center console. I assumed it was my brother reminding me to bring the potato salad. Instead, the name on the screen was my accountant, and the message was 4 words long. Do not go there. I stared at it. My hand was still on the gear shift. The engine hummed. Outside, the October sky was that particular shade of bruised gray that sits right before a storm decides to announce itself. I typed back, "What?" The reply came in under 10 seconds. "Park the car, lock the doors, call me right now." Something cold and instinctive moved through me. Not panic. I have never been someone who panics. My mother used to call it a gift, and my ex-boyfriend called it unsettling, but a kind of deep, cellular alertness. The kind that knows before your brain catches up. I put the car back in park. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you haven't eaten anything today," she said. "I was going to eat at the dinner. What is happening?" "Good. Okay. Good." I could hear her moving, the sound of papers, a door closing. "I need you to drive to my office. Right now. Not home. Not your brother's house. My office. I found something in the trust documents you sent me last week, and I need to show you in person because if I'm reading this correctly, then what your brother and his wife are planning is not just aggressive. It is criminal." The word landed in the car like something dropped from a height. I have known her for 6 years. She does not use words like criminal casually. She barely uses exclamation points in email. "I'm on my way," I said. "Before I pull back out of that driveway, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I want to see how far this reaches, because what I'm about to tell you is something I still have to remind myself actually happened." Her office is 20 minutes from my brother's house on a normal day. I made it in 12. She was waiting at the front door before I even turned off the ignition, which told me everything I needed to know about how serious she considered this, because she is not a woman who waits at doors for anyone. She did not offer coffee. She just walked me straight to the conference table and spread it out. "Your parents' trust," she said, pressing her palm flat against the stack of documents, "was structured so that you are the sole trustee. You manage distributions, you manage the property, you sign everything. Your brother receives a fixed annual distribution and a 1/3 share of any liquidated asset only after certain conditions are met. Are you following me?" "Yes, that's how it's always been." "Right. Now look at this." She slid a page across the table. It was a copy of a petition, the kind filed in probate court, with small, dense legal text and a case number I did not recognize in the upper right corner. I scanned it and felt the room shift slightly, the way it does when something your mind refuses to process is being processed anyway, quietly, underneath the surface. It was a petition to remove me as trustee. Grounds cited: financial mismanagement, erratic behavior, and what the document called a documented pattern of cognitive instability, incompatible with fiduciary duty. I read the last phrase 3 times. "They filed this 8 days ago," she said quietly. Quietly. No notification to you, which is irregular and arguably improper. But an ex parte filing in probate can be done under certain circumstances if the petitioner claims immediate risk to the estate. They claimed immediate risk. What risk? She turned to the next page. There were photographs. The first was taken at my parents' anniversary party 2 summers ago. A photo I had seen before, where I was laughing hard at something my cousin had said. My head thrown back, a glass of wine in my hand. In this context, attached to a legal filing, the caption beneath it read, "Trustee exhibiting public intoxication at family event." The second photo was taken at my father's retirement dinner. I was mid-sentence, pointing at someone across the table, my face animated. Caption, "Trustee, displaying aggressive and erratic behavior toward family members." I remembered both of those moments with perfect clarity. I remembered the joke my cousin told. I remembered exactly who I was pointing at and why my uncle had just made a comment about the cheesecake that sent the whole table into chaos. Photographs are honest about light and shadow. They lie about everything else. "Keep going," she said. There was a financial exhibit, a printout of what was labeled as trust account activity, showing 3 large, unauthorized transfers I had supposedly made. $12,000 in April, $8,500 in June, $23,100 in September. Transfers to an account number I did not recognize. Total, $41,000, allegedly moved by me, allegedly missing. I looked up at her. "I didn't make those transfers." "I know you didn't." She pulled out her own laptop and turned it to face me. "Because I have the actual trust account statements right here, and those transfers do not exist. Not in April, Not in June, not in September. Whoever created that exhibit fabricated the transaction history entirely. The silence in that room had weight. My brother and his wife had not just petitioned to remove me as trustee. They had manufactured evidence of financial crimes I never committed and submitted it to a court under penalty of perjury. I sat back in my chair. My hands were in my lap, and I made sure they were still because something was moving through my chest that was the opposite of stillness. And I have learned over the years that when that happens, the most important thing you can do is stay very, very quiet on the outside. What do they get? I said slowly. If they remove me? She reached for a different document. A property appraisal. The family home, 3 acres, 4 bedrooms, the big wraparound porch where my mother used to grade papers on Sunday mornings, appraised at $2.1 million. If you are removed for cause, she said, the trust dissolves. Assets liquidate. Your brother, as the remaining beneficiary, controls the process. I stared at the number. $2.1 million. My parents had bought that house for $60,000 in 1987. They had paid taxes on it for 30 years. I had been managing the trust for 4 years since my mother passed, writing the checks, filing the documents, being the invisible infrastructure of a family legacy. And my brother had apparently looked at all of that and seen a problem to solve. Why? I asked myself, the same way you ask why about a number that doesn't reconcile. Not emotionally, mathematically. Why now? Why this way? I thought about the dinner I had just been about to attend, the one he called a family check-in, the one his wife had texted me about 3 times this week to confirm, the one I had been driving to with potato salad in a container on the passenger seat. I thought about what would have happened if my accountant hadn't called. I would have walked into that house. I would have sat down at that table. And at some point during the evening, probably after the second glass of wine had softened the edges of everyone's face, something would have happened that was designed to happen. A scene. An outburst provoked and recorded. More photographs for the file. More evidence of the cognitive instability they had decided to build around me like a frame. She hadn't been inviting me to dinner. She had been inviting me to my own setup. I closed the folder. Something clicked into place behind my sternum, clean and cold and decisive. The same feeling I get when I find the error in a dataset that no one else could locate. Not anger. Clarity. Okay, I said. I need everything you have. Every document, every original statement, every filing. And I need the name of the best probate litigation attorney, you know? She smiled for the first time since I arrived. I already texted her on the way to the door. I went home that night and I did not sleep. Not because I was frightened, I want to be clear about that, but because I had work to do. I sat at my kitchen table with 3 browser windows open and a notepad beside my laptop, and I began to do the only thing I have ever been genuinely good at, finding the truth inside a pile of numbers. The fabricated transaction history was the obvious place to start. The account number attached to the fake transfers was not randomized. Someone had typed it in deliberately, which meant it belonged to a real account somewhere. I noted it, flagged it, moved on. Next, I pulled up my own email archive going back 18 months, looking for any communication with my brother or his wife about the trust. What I found took me until 2 in the morning to fully absorb. There were emails from my sister-in-law, warm, casual, asking questions about the trust as if she were simply curious. How is the property tax handled? Who signs off on the annual distributions? If something happened to you, God forbid, what would happen to the trust? I had answered them all patiently, completely, treating them as the innocent questions of a family member trying to understand a complicated document. They were not innocent questions. They were a research phase. She had been mapping the structure for months, learning the vulnerabilities, identifying the pressure points. And I had handed her the blueprint with footnotes. I sat with that for a moment. Let myself feel it. Then I filed it away and kept going. By 3 in the morning, I found the piece that changed everything. Buried in the original trust document, a document drafted by my parents' attorney in 2019, 14 pages of dense legal language I had read carefully when I took over the trusteeship, and upon apparently not carefully enough was a single clause in Section 8, Paragraph 4. It concerned the family home specifically. My parents, who had lived through enough family disputes to be cautious, had included a deed restriction tied to the trust. The property could not be sold to any third party, developer, or commercial interest within 20 years of the trust's inception without unanimous consent of all named beneficiaries and a 6-month notice period to allow any beneficiary to exercise a right of first refusal. The trust was established in 2019, 20 years. The restriction did not expire until 2039. I read it again. And again. And then I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. My brother had already promised that house to someone. I did not know it yet, not with certainty, but I could feel the shape of it the way you can feel a storm before the first drop falls. The rushed timeline. The ex parte filing. The dinner designed to generate one more piece of incriminating documentation. They were not operating at a leisurely pace. They were on a deadline. Someone was waiting for that property. I made a note, closed the laptop, and went to bed. I had 3 hours before I needed to be sharp again. The knock came at 7:45 the next morning, before I had finished my first cup of coffee. Soft, hesitant. The kind of knock that isn't sure it has the right to be made. I checked the door camera on my phone and felt my chest tighten. My niece was standing on my front step, backpack on, still in her school clothes, looking like she had not slept either. She is 16, the same age I was when I decided I wanted to study finance, and she has her father's eyes and her grandmother's stubbornness, which has always made me love her more than I probably should. I opened the door. "They don't know I'm here," she said immediately. "Come in." I got her tea and toast without asking. She sat at my kitchen table and looked at her hands for a long moment before she looked at me. "Mom told me not to say anything. She said it was for your own good, that you needed help you didn't know you needed." She paused. But it didn't feel like help. It felt like something else. I waited. Last month, she had me record a voice memo on my phone. She told me what to say, wrote it out on paper, and had me read it. It was about you. She said you had called me and screamed at me on the phone. You didn't. You've never screamed at me in my life. But I read it and I recorded it and she took my phone, and I don't know what she did with it. I kept my voice steady. Do you remember exactly what the memo said? That you called me, that you were slurring your words, that you told me I wasn't welcome at family events anymore. None of it happened. Her voice cracked at the end, just slightly. I told her I didn't want to do it, and she said if I didn't, she was going to have to cut my college savings contribution because they couldn't afford to keep supporting someone who couldn't support the family. My niece had been coerced into fabricating evidence against me, using her college fund as leverage. She was 16 years old. I stood up and went around the table, and I held on to her for a moment without saying anything, because there was nothing in that moment that words were equal to. She was shaking slightly, the way people shake when they have been holding something too long and are finally allowed to set it down. When she pulled back, she reached into her backpack and produced her iPad. "Dad has a shared family cloud," she said. "He thinks I don't have access to it. I do. I found a folder." She looked at me. "I think you should see it." The folder was labeled Estate Planning Private. Inside was a chain of emails between my brother and a development company I had never heard of. The emails dated back 11 months. The first one was an introduction. "My family owns a 3-acre property in the area that we expect to control outright within 6 months. I'd like to discuss options for subdivision development." They had been working this for nearly a year. The most recent email, dated 4 days ago, was a signed letter of intent with a non-refundable deposit of $250,000 already wired by the development company into an account held jointly by my brother and his wife. The letter of intent referenced the trust property by address. It referenced a transfer date of 60 days. 60 days. That was the deadline. My brother had already spent $250,000, that was not his to take, against a property he did not control, in a timeline he had manufactured out of fabricated evidence and a coerced 16-year-old's recorded voice. I took a very long breath. I photographed every email on the screen. I noted the developer's name, the account details, the wire confirmation number. I texted my accountant and the attorney she had connected me with. I typed, "Need to meet this morning. It's bigger than we thought." Then I looked at my niece, who was watching me with her grandmother's eyes, and I said the only thing that mattered in that moment: "You did the right thing coming here. You're not in trouble. And I promise you, whatever happens next, you are not going to lose your college fund." She exhaled like she'd been underwater. The next 72 hours moved with a kind of crystalline precision that I think about sometimes when people ask me how I stayed calm. The answer is that it was not calm. It was focus. There is a difference. Calm is the absence of feeling. Focus is what happens when you take every feeling you have and you point it at the problem like a lens. My attorney filed an emergency response to the probate petition, attaching the actual trust account statements, the fabricated exhibit in comparison, and a formal request for a forensic audit of any accounts associated with my brother and his wife. She simultaneously contacted the development company's legal counsel to inform them that the property they believed they were purchasing was subject to a 20-year deed restriction that rendered the letter of intent legally void. The development company's attorneys called back within 4 hours. My brother had never disclosed the deed restriction. He had sold them a property he could not legally transfer. $250,000 of their money was sitting in his account tied to a deal that could not close. In the meantime, I sat with my accountant and we traced the account number from the fabricated transaction records. It took 2 days. When we found it, it was registered to a business entity my sister-in-law had formed 8 months ago, a holding company, 2 words, and an LLC, incorporated in a different state. She had been using it to funnel money she had anticipated receiving. She had set up the exit route before the crime was even complete. The probate hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I want to tell you about the night before, because this is the part that people never expect. I was sitting alone in my kitchen at 11 o'clock, the same kitchen where I had sat 2 nights earlier building the case, and for the first time since this started, I felt the full weight of it. Not the legal mechanics, not the strategy, the actual human reality of it. My brother had looked at our parents' house, the house where we both grew up, where my mother hung Christmas ornaments on the banister every December without fail, where my father used to fall asleep in the armchair during football games, and he had calculated its value in dollars and decided that was all it was. He had looked at me, his younger sister, and decided I was an obstacle. He had looked at his own daughter and decided her loyalty was a resource to be leveraged. I sat with that and I let it hurt. Because it does hurt. It will always hurt. And I think there is something important about not pretending otherwise, about not letting the forensic composure become a wall that keeps the grief out along with everything else. Then I closed that door, finished my tea, and went to bed. At the hearing, I did something that confused my attorney until I explained it afterward. I did not come in aggressive. I did not lead with the smoking gun. I came in quiet, composed, and I let my brother's attorney spend 40 minutes presenting their petition. The photographs, the fabricated financial records, the character witnesses, the structure of their entire manufactured case. I let them build it completely, every false brick in place. Then my attorney stood up. She presented the original trust account statements first. The silence in the room when the judge compared them to the fabricated exhibit was the particular silence of a thing that cannot be argued with. Then she presented the email chain with the development company, then the letter of intent, then the wire transfer, then the deed restriction from Section 8, Paragraph 4. Then, last, she placed on record a sworn statement from my niece filed separately, with a guardian ad litem appointed to protect her interests, describing in her own words the coercion of the voice memo, what she was told to say, and the threat made against her college fund to secure her compliance. My brother's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. The petition to remove me as trustee was dismissed with prejudice, which means it cannot be refiled. The judge issued a formal finding of bad faith conduct and referred the fabricated financial exhibits to the district attorney's office for review. 2 weeks later, the development company filed a civil suit against my brother and his wife for fraudulent misrepresentation in a real estate transaction, seeking recovery of the $250,000 deposit plus damages. The criminal referral resulted in charges being filed. My brother faced 2 counts of fraud upon the court for submitting falsified documents in a probate proceeding and 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud related to the development deal. His wife faced the same fraud charges plus an additional count of suborning a minor to provide false testimony, which under state law carried a mandatory minimum. Their combined sentencing, handed down 4 months later, was 3 years for him, 4.5 years for her, with the possibility of parole after serving 60%. The development company, once they understood the full picture, cooperated with prosecutors. The LLC she had formed to receive the anticipated funds was seized as part of the fraud investigation. My niece was removed from their custody during the criminal proceedings. After a period in temporary placement, the court approved my petition for permanent guardianship. The college fund she had been threatened with was part of the asset freeze. But there was a separate account my parents had established years ago, one that my brother and his wife had no access to and had apparently not known about, and it was more than enough. She is sitting in the other room right now doing homework as I record this. I can hear her music. There is something I have been thinking about in the months since all of this resolved, something that I keep coming back to when I try to understand what actually happened and why it hurt as much as it did even when I was winning. My brother did not see the house as something worth protecting. He saw it as something worth converting. There is a particular kind of grief in discovering that someone you grew up with, Someone who ate at the same table and heard the same bedtime stories and stood at the same gravesides has been looking at everything your family built and thinking only about what it could be traded for. But here's what I have come to understand. The people who treat legacy like currency are always operating on a shorter timeline than they realize. They are always in a hurry. That hurry is the tell. That hurry is the crack in the foundation. Because the things worth protecting, the ones that have already outlasted the people who built them, those things do not hurry. They simply wait to be understood. I still manage the trust. The house is still standing. The wraparound porch still faces east, and on Sunday mornings when the light is right, I take my coffee out there, and I understand exactly why my parents never wanted it to become anything other than what it already was. Some things you don't own. You just hold them until it's someone else's turn.